During the stay in South Korea last year, taking care of my parents, I had a chance to complete a cross-country tour with my little bicycle. That is about 630 kilometers, equivalent to 390 miles. It sounds very awesome with a cross-country tour, but remember South Korea is 6 times smaller than Texas, so it's not that bad, I guess. Ever since then, I got really interested in the world of bicycle. While building an interest on this new exercise, hobby, I happened to know a name, Stephen Roche, R-O-C-H-E, Stephen Roche, who is considered one of the island's greatest cyclists. Wikipedia states that his finest hour came on the day he won the Tour de France in 1987, becoming the second of only 2 cyclists to win triple crowns of victories. Like there are 3 world-renowned cyclist competitions, and he won 3 of them. It's only 2. He's the second of the triple crown of victories. He had his best hours in 1987. Well, why am I bringing this? While I was preparing this weekend homily, while I was reading all the readings, especially the gospel, and his name came to me and a thought came to my mind. When we think of a person's finest hour, when we think of our lives, when would be my finest hour, finest day in my life, we think of it in very worldly terms, worldly matters. We see this as an hour of triumph and victory, or triumph and glory and victory. We tend to speak of it in a rather clean way, awesome way. We concentrate solely on the hour of glory. Oh, I did that, I did this, that was my best time, my whole life. But we often forget the fact that in order to make that hour of glory possible, it requires many other times, many other hours of blood, sweat, and tears. I remember while I was doing the cross-country tour, the 3rd day, I did a 4 nights, 5 days trip. That's the continuous one. 3rd day, I had an uphill 5 kilometers, about 3.5 miles. Nothing but uphill, right? I thought, why the heck am I doing this, right? And then what happened was, once I reached the top of the uphill, and downhill happens almost like 8 miles. 8 kilometers, about 5 miles. I was like, woohoo, I'm the top of the world. You see, the glory cannot be separate from the pain. And pain, that is a part of the joy, at least my experience at the moment there. Now, Jesus too spoke about his hour. You heard the gospel today. His hour. He spoke about his hour several times during his public ministry, especially in the Gospel of John. And in the early chapter of the Gospel of John, he always spoke of it as not having yet come. He says, my hour is not yet here. My hour is not yet done. His hour is not arrived or come. That's what the Gospel of John said. Very early chapters. However, in today's Gospel message, He speaks of it as having come at last. His hour has come. Now, what kind of hour had he in mind? What kind of hour? Okay, spoiler warning, you already know the answer, right? His hour, the hour of glory, is not according to the worldly point of view. The hour in question was the hour of his death. His death. It was an hour of supreme self-giving in which he made a complete sacrifice of himself for us. Let's be honest on this matter, really. We tended to take these things for granted. From the worldly point of view, his hour was an hour of a failure. His followers, imagine that. His followers, he heard he's a Messiah. He's the King of glory. He will restore the glory of Israel. He is the one. And yet, those followers saw his leader completely humiliated and died on the cross. This is a failure from the world point of view. Worse, it was an hour of shame and humiliation. He was naked. His clothes was torn down. He was in the middle, left and right, the notorious thieves died along with him. This is failure from the world point of view. But unlike our world view, God did something very peculiar. By raising him from the dead, God turned it into an hour of triumph for Jesus and an hour of grace for us. Ironically, this hour was Jesus' finest hour. Finest hour. This was the hour when all that he had come to do on earth was accomplished. Remember, very last word of Jesus, which we are going to hear next week. Well, it depends on which gospel we are going to read. But think about it, especially the Gospel of John. What was the very last word that Jesus said on the cross? It is finished. It is accomplished. It is done, depending on the translation. All his life had led him to this hour and prepared him for it. The lowest point proved to be a turning point. I'm going to do it. Last time, 2 masses, I failed it. I'm going to try. I'm going to use a special effect. The lowest point proved to be a turning point. I want to do this one didn't work. This one didn't work either. You see the point now, turning point. This is a great paradox. The lowest, darkest, and most painful hour in the life of seed is the hour in which it dies. And yet, this is precisely the hour in which new life is born. There is a reason why Jesus is talking about the seed in today's gospel. This is precisely the hour that Jesus is talking about. His finest hour. I'm told this one so many times, so I'm saying it again to you. Christianity, let's just get rid of our preconception of Christianity, because it seems that we take it for granted. Just imagine that there's somebody who never heard anything about Christianity. This is his or her first time to hear. Christianity is a strange religion. Think about it. God became human. He suffered and died, shamed, humiliated on the cross. Christianity is absurd. paradoxical, even appears to be ridiculous from time to time. The God became human and the God says what? Love your enemy? Are you serious, really? If you get the hit, if you got the chick this time, do you give another one like that? Are you serious? From world point of view, this is ridiculous. Again, the finest hour of Jesus proves the same point here. It's a very absurd and strange religion. So, what has to do with our life, right? What shall we do? I mean, okay, I hear all these wonderful stories, okay? I see what Jesus did, that it's very paradoxical, I got it. But what has to do with our life? It is the same with ourselves. Our lowest moments can prove to be turning points. Moments of great worldly success soon fade and often leave people empty inside. I bet you had that experience, right? You worked really hard. You really worked hard to get there because you know that once I get there, it will give me a great comfort. I will be successful. But you and I know once we got there, sure, certain time, certain hour, we might feel great thing about ourselves. But after several hours and days, you feel like there's a great abyss, emptiness came. On the other hand, moments of darkness, weakness, and failure can prove to be the moments of great change and growth. As for the instance, when an alcoholic hits a rock bottom and by the grace of God manages to turn his or her life around, I personally witnessed throughout my preceding life. Thanks be to God for that. I saw young men who struggling with the drug addictions. Many times he came to me, my previous assignment, knelt down and crying, Father, I cannot do this. I cannot do this alone. I think God is abandoning me. Low is the darkest moment. Someday, one day, at the Mass, I saw him. He just do this. And he's doing that still. Reflecting on what for Jesus was his finest hour will help us to evaluate our lives differently. Looking back on our lives, we will see that. The incident which seemed to be great failures were the incident which shaped the lives we have now. I bet some of you might say right now in your heart, Amen, yeah, I believe. Father, I believe. Things that hurt us and things that which helped us cannot be separate from each other. Don't get me wrong, we all know that moment, it's not easy, just like this young man I mentioned that. It was tough. Oh, I tell you what, when I went that uphill, right? 5 kilos, I tell you, uphill I'm talking about not just only 3%, the 4%, I'm talking about 10% of the angle of the hill for 5 kilometers. I really thought, oh my gosh, God is going to kill me. But in the end, when I hit the top of the hill and then going down to downhill, I praise the Lord every single minute. To survive the low moment requires a special kind of faith. It involves a sowing in tears. It would be unbearable unless there was a quiet hope mixed with our sadness. Going back to my uphill experience, although I was suffering, you know what? There will be a top coming. You know what? There will be top coming. Came. And I enjoyed every single minute downhill. Let me summarize the entire homily with these two quotations. The first quotation, and that was because this quotation will summarize everything for you. Sometimes we hear the harmony and then, oh, okay, that's good, that's wonderful. Then by the time you end the harmony, by the time you finish hearing harmony, okay, he was good, but I don't remember what he said. So here's a summary, which is a good quotation. Now, I have a little confession. I have a little note called illustration. Whenever I read a book or newspaper or good story, I tend to write down and copy and paste it. And so I have an illustration note so that I can share the harmony with all those stories. Unfortunately, I have no idea where I got this source, okay? So if you ask me, Father, that was great. Tell me where you got it. I'm sorry, I don't know. So this is a story. It's about this quotation from the direct translation from the word of Van Gogh, G-O-G-H. He's a painter. I'm sure that some of you already know Van Gogh. This is what he said. If you pay attention to this, you know why I quote this. Quote, painting requires a lot of faith because one cannot prove at the outset that it will succeed. In the first year of hard struggling, it may even be a sowing of tears. But we shall check them, because in the far distance we have a quiet hope of the harvest. It's not just a painting that requires a lot of faith. Life requires a lot of faith because it often involves sowing in sadness, in darkness, and sometimes almost in despair. But if we sow the good, we will reap a harvest and reap it in joy, a joy made all the sweeter by the pain endured during the sowing. I bet those ladies who gave birth, you know what that means more than ever. Another quotation, we can get this one easily. Psalm 126, 5 and 6. Again, it's a summary. Psalm 126, 5 and 6. 126, verse 5 and 6. Those who sow in tears, oh, how much should I do this? Those who sow in tears will reap with cries of joy. This is from the Psalm. Those who go forth weeping, carrying the sacks of seed, will return with cries of joy, carrying their bundled sheaves. If you're a farmer, you know what I'm talking about. Huh? So if you are going through a hard time right now, then my brothers and sisters, pay attention to next week, Palm Sunday. And we will hear very detailed his finest hour. Walk with the journey of the Lord, especially next week, if you have a hard time. Participate in his finest hour, because we will hear all the details. Who knows? Jesus will rekindle your heart, and you may see the slightest yet brightest light coming from the end of the tunnel of your hardship. One thing that I can say with my own conviction is this. In the end, I'm not saying this one from the book, I'm convinced. In the end, good triumphs. Life triumphs because ultimately, God has the last word, and he says, it is finished.